Okay. Yeah, so we'll just jump right in. I'm Dr. Katitha Olengue with Developing Doc, and I'm really excited to be talking to Head and Toe Financial Planning, run by Annelise Bretthauer and Nathan Schorsch. We've just recently met, and
humanity is perfect.
exactly. It's like it doesn't even, yeah. So I'm really excited to talk to both of you guys today. I know that we talked briefly and just realized that both of us have that understanding about how important finances is and mental health in the world of medicine. And so I'm just super excited to talk to you guys both today. And so I just wanted to first ask you if one of you guys could tell me about head to toe financial planning and what is it?
Yeah, go for it, Nathan.
So I started head to toe financial planning in early 2018. I had worked in the financial industry before for a large multinational corporation that basically focused on selling life insurance and other insurance products, and kind of putting the planning aspect basically to the side, and very quickly realized that that's not really what I wanted to do at all. So ended up looking for a job that I really was going to be passionate about, and realized that either that job didn't exist or wasn't being hired for. So basically, after a certain amount of time, I just said, you know what, then if the world's not going to provide me with what I want, then I'll just create it and go from there. Given my background with my family being almost primarily medical professionals, doctors, psychologists, psychiatrists, everything, it was definitely a demographic and a population that I felt comfortable with.
Mm-hmm.
When I married my wife, she was a nurse. Her whole family is doctors. So it was just kind of an extension of that. And, because there have been so many psychiatrists in our family, that focus on mental health has always been there.
Mm-hmm.
And, knowing all the struggles that young doctors go through to, finish medical school, get through residency, then, kind of start out their careers, most of them that we knew didn't really have a solid grasp on finance. So it seemed like a great opportunity to kind of help out those who are closest to us, and, kind of make some of those people more aware of their financial options, and, teaching them about how to at least get through life. Because it seems medical schools and other programs just don't teach that anymore.
Medical schools don't teach you how to get through life. That is very interesting. We'll come back to that because they teach a lot, but I think that is something that they should probably put a disclaimer. This is not a life course. And Annelise, what about you? How did you get involved with head to toe financial planning?
Yeah, so I started my career after undergrad in advertising and very quickly realized I had made a misstep. What I thought and what was reality did not align. And so I started job shadowing, and I job shadowed a bunch of different industries, sales, medical device, a bunch of different stuff. And my mom worked in the financial industry and worked for a company here in Portland, a fairly well-known company in Portland. And the CEO, when she worked there, was still the CEO. And so it's a woman. She reached out to her and said, hey, would you mind having Annelise for the day? And she was like, yeah, sure, have her come in. And so I went, and then I said, can I come back tomorrow? And I just kind of kept showing up, and they were like, well, I guess we can't get rid of her, so let's give her some things to do. So I kind of ended up as a little intern type situation there. And I sat down with the CEO, her name's Janine, and I was like, okay, Janine, I want to come work here. What do I need to do? And she said, go get your MBA in finance. And so that's what I did. So I went back to school, did an MBA in finance, came back to the same company on the financial planning side, between my years of the MBA, and then was hired full-time afterwards. And then I got Crohn's disease.
Wow.
So I was there for 3 years as a financial planner, and Crohn's kind of turned my life upside down. It was not planned. I was a unique scenario because I was healthy and then really sick within a very short period of time.
Wow.
Yeah, so I learned a lot about myself. Speaking of mental health, I did not tell anyone how bad it actually was. So I kind of just ended up on this, like I jumped off a cliff. My health kind of jumped off a cliff. And I realized I just had to do something different. So decided to leave and take a break for a bit, and realized that the only way to really make the decisions I needed to for my body was to start something myself. So started a firm similar to Nathan, and Nathan and I met happenstance in a random group that we're a part of. And one day we had a little mastermind, and one day he was like, we should just join forces. And I was like, join forces? Like, I'm building this thing. And he's like, yeah, me too. And it could be better together.
I love that.
And here we are.
That is amazing. I was just about to say, how did you guys meet? That is really, really cool. And wow. And so when Nathan, you had thank you so much, Annelise, for sharing your story, and Nathan for sharing your story. It is interesting how medicine and health seems to creep its way into everything. I don't think you can really live this life without tumbling with something and kind of, having to become more, introspective and really look at what you're doing and how you're doing it. So I really appreciate those stories. So you mentioned that, and I've heard that been thrown around a lot, that doctors are not good with their finances. And what does that mean? What have you seen, and how can that be possible? They're so smart, they go through all this schooling. Like what is it? Where do they miss that education?
So from my perspective, which again is both less and more valuable being kind of on the outside, some of the things I see is that a lot of higher education doesn't focus on financial literacy and making sure people have those basics, making sure that they have a budgeting system, or, figuring out how different savings mechanisms work. It's just not something that they focus on. And given that, doctors spend such a long time in higher education, most of them in a period of time where they're very focused on a specific area of medicine, they just don't have generally the time and energy to put into learning all of those kind of ins and outs. Just as a lot of, there are a lot of acronyms and expressions in medicine.
Yeah.
It's like learning another language when you're trying to get into finance as well. So there's definitely a high barrier for entry to get really comfortable with finance. And there are plenty of doctors who are great with their finances. That's not to say that, all doctors are terrible, because that's absolutely not true. But a lot of them typically don't have the time and energy to devote to actually gaining a deeper understanding. So it has nothing to do with ability. It's merely an opportunity cost.
I agree, absolutely. And there's this culture around money in our society where you're expected to know these things, yet nobody teaches you. And this is even more heightened for physicians, because people think of them, as you said, and as they are, extremely intelligent, some of the most intelligent people in this world. And so they're expected to know finance. So they don't ask. but nobody's taught any of us, unless we had the good fortune of having parents or a mentor to kind of walk us along the way, or you've spent hours and hours like yourself in learning.
Yeah.
It's just, there's no easy way to attain that type of information. And it's really, there hasn't been access either. So that's something that we're trying to change. And I think you are also trying to change, because it's such a big problem.
And is it something that you can learn? I'm just thinking, because, you spoke about higher education, Nathan, and you said, Annelise, that people don't have access. I'm wondering, like, is this something you can learn in elementary and junior high? And is it lacking in, or is it something that you don't really have a concept yet until you have a salary and,
So I think it's probably a little bit of both. It's much easier when the numbers you're playing around with are actually real.
Yeah.
So it's hard, to be in like fourth grade being like, oh, I'm making, this much money and this is how this all works. It's that tends to not get across as well. But I'm trying to think, and I don't remember a single class that I took that was at least in general education from, kindergarten through college. I don't remember a single class that was specifically focused on like teaching us how to operate in a financial world.
Yeah, there's definitely a lack of education. The processes, the type of thinking that builds good financial habits, I think can absolutely be taught in elementary school, middle school, high school. It's really hard. It's any classroom learning until you've had hands-on experience. It's like, why do medical doctors do residencies? Because they're taking that classroom experience and they're applying it in a way that they still have support. So if you think of what Nathan and I do with financial planning, is we become the classroom, and we're helping you implement with support.
Okay.
So, and eventually, hopefully our hope is that at some point, people need us less and less because we're teaching them. And, or they might need us differently. But the evolution is, even if you teach it in a classroom and then you go expect people to apply it, it doesn't work out nicely like that.
That makes me think. So I'm trying to think of like one of the first things financially that I kind of needed to understand, and with education, that was loans. And I know that I signed what they call a promissory note, which I think goes over everything, right? Does it? But
it has a lot.
Yeah, my question is, in addition to the promissory note, and if you can speak on that too as well, what kind of education are people getting about loans? Let's just start off on that in the beginning. Like, what are people getting? And what should they know? And what do you see that, if you could tell like all the people listening right now, or the people that are going to be reading this, what they should know about loans? So that's like kind of a two-part question. What are people getting about loans, and what might be missing?
Yeah. Do you want me to go? I'm like watching Nathan's face, trying to, decide. We're not just
Take it away, Annelise.
It's a really good question.
Yeah, it is.
And unfortunately, the world of financial loans is incredibly complicated. World of student loans, especially, is incredibly complicated. There's a lot of convoluted things that go on. Student loans are its own separate language as well. So it's definitely tough in terms of, what people should know. There's just, it's such a fraught world with pitfalls that, for example, if you've got $500,000 or $600,000 in student loans, and you pick the wrong repayment plan, you're going to end up paying hundreds of thousands of dollars more than you would if you pick the right one. So it's one of those things where doctors are in a really unfortunate place because they are being forced to understand an incredibly complicated world, and the stakes are incredibly high because of the large amount of loans that almost everyone has to take out just to get through the educational part. I'm trying to think of, distill everything down into the one thing people should know.
Well, like,
Ask for help.
yeah, ask for help, because what I found when I was looking at repayment plans, now that I'm in residency, I found interesting seeing that there were different, or in medical school I noticed this too, different types of loans like Stafford and Direct and Perkins, and so would you say just plainly that the type of loan that you get matters, and do you have much of a choice?
Oftentimes, there's not a whole lot of a choice. Maybe sometimes, but in general, there's not. Back to your initial question is, what are people getting? They're getting the stack of paper that they're probably not reading.
Okay.
And even if they do read it, half of it is in financial jargon. And you're so focused on school and your career that even if it is in somewhat plain English, you're like, okay, yeah, I just need to go to school, so I'm going to sign this. What's my alternative? So then, as far as what people should know, I think the key is just to not bury your head in the sand and ask. And who you ask is very, very important, because there's a lot of bad information out there. And there's a lot of people who have really good intentions, but not the appropriate knowledge to give you good advice.
Okay.
So,
and as a pre-med student, someone who is, in college, deciding, studying something, and they're having to take out some loans, you get the loans now. How do they need to? Is asking for help something that needs to happen every time you get a new loan, or is it something that needs to happen after your education is over? Or when would you say the touch points are? Because that's always a confusing thing too. It's not like when you go to the doctor and there's an issue, they say, okay, you need to check up with us in a month, or annually, or every 6 months. But I've always been confused in the financial world is like, how often should you check in, and with who?
Good question. It's a little bit personal. I think probably you've kind of got this general sense, which is at least annually. Sit down, look through all of your stuff, make sure you understand it. You can keep a file of like all that paper you don't want to read, and get yourself a drink, alcoholic, non-alcoholic, whatever it is. Get yourself something to make you, feel a little bit looser.
Excited about reading paperwork.
Yeah. And take a highlighter. And maybe do it with a friend. Take a highlighter and be like, does that make any sense to you? And just go through, write down your questions. Figure out. Yeah. And then there's a variety of resources to go to. I would not ask the question of only a single person. So ask Google, ask, the financial aid department, ask your student loan servicer, and that will give you a better sense of if everyone's saying the same thing, you can kind of be like, okay, it's probably good advice. But if everybody's saying something different, that's your key to say, I need to do more research.
It's so interesting because what you're asking of people of there is to not avoid.
Yeah. And that's especially important with doctors and with those finishing up medical school. Because as I mentioned, if you pick the wrong repayment plan, you're going to end up paying way more. The unfortunate thing is a lot of the decisions you're making around student loans need to really be premeditated. So you don't want to leave it until after you've graduated. You want to at least be aware of what you have, kind of the specifics around each of the loans that you have, and then also have a general strategy for how to attack them. It may not be something that you end up carrying out for the life of the loans, but having a strategy that you feel comfortable with and, you believe in is going to make your life so much easier over the course of residency, once you hit attending, and, as long as it takes to pay those off.
How many, because I'm like you said, I'm the type that did the research. I didn't avoid because I just don't avoid. And I think I just do the same philosophy I use in health, because it just seemed, yeah, I'm not an avoidant person, but I understand doing it. It's pretty scary. I'm the type of person that would go on the nslsd.gov and, just like every semester, just have an updated one in my year 1, year 2, whatever I was, to remember. And to have that. How many, from your experience, like, and I don't know if you have an exact number, but how many people, pre-med, medical school residents, are of the avoidant type, or maybe just the financial world, versus like, how many people do you think keep track versus don't even touch it?
If you are one of the people that don't keep track and you're listening or reading or what have you to this, you are in good company. There are a lot of people who take that approach.
The vast majority of people don't pay enough attention to it and try to avoid it.
I think it's almost easier to avoid when other people are not avoiding it, because I am thinking, going through it, and it's almost like a joke, oh, I have so many loans, or this is fake money. And it kind of is like this sad joke that no one's like, everyone's just kind of like, ah. And then, if someone were to say, oh, I think the times that I have vocalized, or shared a little bit more, I have seen the panic in people's eyes, like, should I be doing that? It's like when you don't study for the test and you're like, wait, you looked at that PowerPoint? I didn't open that one. And it's like, yeah, I did.
You nailed it.
Yeah.
That's exactly it.
That's so psychological. That's why I think it's so interesting.
Absolutely. And this I'm really hoping is changing. But I know that in past generations, there has been it's definitely a stereotype, but for decent reason, of physicians not really talking about money. Whereas, a lot of other industries have people be like, hey, I got this thing for my 401k. Like, do you understand what's going on? Doctors tend to be a little bit more, I'm going to get in so much trouble here, a little bit more prideful. And a little bit more wanting to project that they're in control, whether they are or not. And so when that couples with kind of that tack of avoiding things, is when you see people get into really bad trouble. Because then, they're 10 years into their career, they still haven't really figured out how to handle their student loans. Debt is piling up because they've tried to keep up with the other doctors. And that's when you start to see increased levels of burnout. So when all that stuff starts piling up and they've just been avoiding it, then it tends to all hit at once, which can be devastating.
Wow, you see, and because that's going to really go into my next question of like, what are the consequences of avoiding it? And I think that I don't think that I've seen so many of them, because, I'm just my first year of residency. I've seen the stage of people not really talking about their loans, because there's nothing you can really do, right? And then in residency, it's variable what you can do. It's, you either keep your payment low, or there's not much you can do. So you're kind of opening up an area that I just don't know much about, and I think it's where the consequences really show. So what can happen down there? And I think that's really important for people to hear, especially that those who are at the beginning where I am, like, how bad can it get? Because I honestly didn't even fathom the fact that people will not pay their loans off for 10 years, or maybe not pay them loans off but not even have a plan for them. And they double, do they triple? Like, what happens?
Well, I mean, it can really depend on how far you're willing to go in terms of avoiding things. I know someone who, and I'm trying to be non-judgmental, but just didn't want to deal with it, so never called their loan servicer. So they were basically in forbearance and then, kept not paying. So they kept deferring the payments. They kept deferring. And basically what ended up happening was they still have all of their original loans, and now their credit score is in the 400s, basically.
Oh yes, because this affects your credit.
And tell people what does that mean? Like
Yeah.
if you have a credit score of 400, practically, what does that mean?
Right. So at that point in time, they, couldn't really get a car to go to work. Any chance of buying a house is gone essentially for however many years it takes them to repair the credit, which if they're not at least addressing their deferred student loans is not going to happen anytime soon.
They want to retire.
Right.
The worst case scenario is you can't get the approval for any of the luxuries in life, like buying a house, like making investments, buying a car. You need credit for a lot of these things. And on the other side of things, people want to retire. You want to be able to have flexibility. We talk about wealth as being the ability to do what you want, when you want, with who you want, and how long you want. And that, I think, is ultimately what everybody wants, is, to create their own life of happiness, doing what they want, when they want, with who they want, and for how long. And so putting your head in the sand for too long in too much capacity, that's, you give up that. It's all about a trade-off.
Ooh, that really scares me. Like, I think
It's scary.
I wanted to say that I thought about, I really saw it through the lens of where I was. I don't think I've ever, hearing you explain that, I see how that could lead to someone being, really, really, really bad mental health consequences. Because at that point, I don't know. I a lot of the symptoms of depression. And so I just see that leading directly to that, because it's kind of like, what are you doing? Like,
your options have caved in.
Yeah.
Right.
It's so odd. It's like, it's weird because I know a lot of physicians don't want to do things for the money. Like, you go into the profession because you want to help people, but then it really becomes about the money, because not taking the loan becomes this like tiger or something like on your back. Sorry, my idioms are terrible, but something that you like now is ruining you.
Yeah.
Yep.
Which is so scary.
Yeah. And I do want to, if anybody who's listening or reading this is going down that path, you have to give yourself some grace, because there is always time to turn it around. And that is the hard thing to do. I mean, Nathan and I help people do this kind of stuff. And yes, after the meeting, we're like, oh, I wish we could have got to them 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Which is ideally the situation where we can help you. We can be that support system like you have in residency when you're like, what do I do about this? You have somebody to go to.
Yeah.
But if you haven't had that, if you've made some of these choices, there is a path out.
Okay.
And the sooner you get on that path, the better.
And that is a very good point. There is absolutely always a path out, but also it also highlights what is really scary about kind of getting into that trouble in the first place is, as Annelise said, like your options tend to cave in and you get like tunnel vision. That's going to impact every facet of your life. There's going to be mental health issues that are going to come from that. But also there's just going to be a sense of not necessarily dread, but just kind of helplessness.
Yeah. It's so eerily similar to what you see in like something like depression or something, you know, it's like someone's kind of suffering for many years. And I love what you said, Annelise, because I, as a, like a mental health physician, I have that feeling too. Like I wish, you know, I knew you as as a child and could tell you, you know, don't form these negative thought patterns, like don't do it. You know, I think you just wish you could save someone earlier, but I do love that positive message because it can turn around then and we can start talking about things. It's not going to be easy, but would it, you know, are these things ever easy?
Right.
So that's
your role is so key in that way out.
Yeah. Oh,
Because
yeah.
until you can get yourself in a healthy place emotionally, mentally, even physically, and a lot of that starts with, you know, the brain.
Yeah.
And like using someone like yourself to get yourself there, that is what opens up the capacity for Nathan and I to really get that person moving. Because I always say our business is about taking action. You know, like if we can't help you take action, we are not worth what you're paying us.
Yeah.
So we really need to help clients get to taking action.
Do you find that people in the financial world often link themselves up with mental health professionals? Because I don't hear this.
It's crazy.
I feel like this is, I don't know, some people might be like, why are they talking? But I'm like, why aren't we talking? We should have, I'm like, I was really about, can I join you guys after residency and just like, you know what I mean? We have this like dual thing. Because I just, why do you think that is? And I'm just so, I don't know, I'm just so thrilled to meet you guys, to know that that's important, and to, because I'm sure you share that with your clients.
Yeah, and we feel exactly the same. I have an answer for why this is the way it is, but I think Nathan had one too. I'm curious to see if both ours are the same.
We may have similar answers, but go for it.
Okay. In my opinion, the reason this is the way it is because the financial industry historically has been built around selling people products.
Okay.
And that was the focus. And the financial industry, especially financial advisors, have gotten, and there are still plenty of them out there selling products, but have gotten a bad name because of that. There's no name for what Nathan and I do compared to somebody who sells product. It's very difficult for the consumer to figure that out. But I think that's why the mental health piece is missing, because of the history of kind of how the financial services industry has worked.
Okay.
So the one thing that I thought of was, and you know, this is kind of just the way it is that both money and mental health have serious stigmas around them in terms of open communication. And I mean, if you look at, you know, what drives wedges into relationships, every year the number one thing is money. And people, as a very broad generalization, people struggle in communication when talking about mental health and when talking about money. And so to link those two is basically putting two very hard conversations together.
Yeah.
And like, I completely get it. Like, I completely get it. I can't imagine anyone is excited to be like, cool, I want to talk about all of my money issues. About all of my mental health problems.
Yeah.
But really, if we can start having those conversations,
much better.
It's gonna change from people not seeing a way out to all of a sudden being like, okay, I can take some small actions and put myself on the right path, and, you know, have the support and feel good about all these decisions that I'm making.
Yeah. Vulnerability hangover for sure.
Yep.
It's just, these things are, I mean, we're just linking all the similarities, because people are avoided about mental health too, and it's hard, but once you do, you understand yourself better, and you can just, I mean, it's hard, but it's the alternative is really scary, you know, and it is just no way to live.
Yeah. Also probably why people bury their head in the sand. You know, when the alternative is so scary that instead of taking action one way, it's easier to just kind of put your head in the sand.
Yeah. And just hope that nothing happens. It's like not flossing. So many cavities. And I think that's the one I struggle with. I'm not going to say, like, if I had to say that, I'm like, okay, I address money, I address mental health. I don't address my teeth. I have 2 cavities.
I was super excited about finance and mental health.
Yeah.
The dentistry is going to be a little bit hard, but I think we can get there.
Right there, right?
I have the same problem though. The flossing thing, like there's something very satisfying about brushing your teeth. Like you feel all minty. You're like, oh yeah. Flossing, you're just like, oh, I have to like work hard now. Like I have an electric toothbrush and now I have to floss. So here's what worked for me. It's my secret weapon.
Oh, perfect.
My floss sits on top of my nightstand.
So you have to do it, yeah.
When I go to plug in my phone, and I always like surf the internet or like watch a video before bed.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, Annelise, get your floss and watch the video.
Amazing. The tricks.
Yeah. But
I love watching this because you get so much out of this, but you also get a floss trick.
Yeah, it's like a 2-for-1. But I'll tell you the downside, because then you have floss and you're like not gonna get up out of bed
and you just
throw it away. So my drawer is like full of floss. Used floss. Not clean floss.
We have to talk about that. I think we need an intervention.
These are the interview questions I should have asked before partnering with you, Annelise.
I know.
But at least
Do you have a shame drawer next to your bed that's just full of used floss?
Once in a while, I empty it.
Oh my God. I love that so much. Thank you so much for your honesty. It just makes me feel so comfortable with you. That is amazing.
I mean, there's no shame.
There's no shame. I have cavities. You have probably none because you floss. Drawer full of floss, cavities.
Yeah. I mean, it's all the same. We can even link this back to budgeting. You know, there's no one size fits all.
There's no one size fits all.
Oh my God.
I do have a question because you guys talked about how people don't know where to go for support. And so what I think what popped into my head is financial advisor. Is that what people like especially when you're in residence beyond, you're having a salary, you have these loans, is it a financial advisor? Is that the person you should be going to?
We are biased because we are financial planners.
Okay. Oh, planner. Can you talk a little bit about planners versus advisors?
Oh, sure. Yeah. There's no standard. This is kind of part of the issues with consumers trying to figure out who's selling product and who is truly giving advice and legally upheld to a standard to put the client's interest before their own.
Mm-hmm.
So we talk about this in a couple of our presentations. But yes, finding yourself a fee-only financial planner or financial advisor who has expertise in student loans, who works with physicians. You know, there's a group of us out there who have that expertise and who work in the best interest of the clients. Mm-hmm. And that's your kind of double whammy to get from here to there without so much stress that you bury your head in the sand.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, a lot of the people who tend to show up at residency programs or medical schools to do some sort of financial talk typically are there to sell insurance.
Okay.
And one of the interesting things is when I started this and when we partnered, we wanted to make very sure that we were there first to help with student loans. Mm-hmm. Because that is the first, second, and third thing on every resident's mind.
Yeah.
And yeah, exactly. It's hard not to think about when you've got $400,000.
I know.
I
It's so
get it.
expensive. It's like,
It's
what the hell is
ridiculous.
this? When did I pay for it?
Ridiculous.
You did
But
so
the
much
other,
work. You're just confused. You're like, I worked so hard and I owe $400K. And it's growing? Give me a break. Give me a break.
And there's nobody there to give me good advice.
That's what I'm saying. It's like, didn't I buy that? Doesn't this come with someone to help me?
Yeah, it's like when you buy that gift for a child and they're like all excited about it and you forgot the batteries. And you like pull it out and they're all ready to use it and then it's like batteries not included and you're like, really? You couldn't include 2 AAA batteries?
Yeah, exactly. Just include it in the cost.
Yeah. I'll happily pay you $2 extra.
Yeah, if that was $420,000 and it came with a financial advisor, like, yippee! Or financial planner, yippee! Like, I just can't believe they did not sneak that in the cost. Like,
yeah. I mean, hey, who knows? Maybe we can shift to that model.
yeah, honestly, that would be nice. Yeah.
We need some politicians on our team if we're
Yeah.
going
So, yeah, that's the thing. We need the lawyers. So that's so, oh my gosh, I'm like, wow. This is just such an interesting topic, and I'm just so happy for people to hear about this and learn more. When it comes to residents, you've mentioned before that you have to make a lot of or like that repayment decision. What I guess what decisions, can you talk a little bit about repayment?
Yeah.
And why it's so important.
Right. So this is also getting back to a previous point about making sure you have a strategy.
Strategy.
Because for most people, jumping into residency, obviously there's a fair amount of anxiety as you're like, oh, okay, now it's time to like do things. All right, let's do this. And the other thing, the tangent, July 4th, like when all the residents start, it boggles my mind that it's like, hey, you know that holiday where everyone gets injured from fireworks?
Yeah.
Let's throw a bunch of residents into the deep end.
Yeah.
Come on.
At the VA too. Yeah. Terrifying. Yeah.
But so some of the strategies involved in repaying student loans, some of the more popular ones like public service loan forgiveness, where if you work for a 501c3, you make basically 10 years of payments and then the balance is forgiven. Mm-hmm. But a lot of the options.
501c3 is nonprofit.
Yeah.
Just for people who aren't familiar with that term.
Yeah.
A nonprofit organization.
Okay. Which most like university hospitals are.
Almost all hospitals and clinics are certified nonprofits.
Interesting.
So you guys are lucky. Well done. But the way it works is you have to be on an income-based repayment plan. Mm-hmm. So instead of looking at like the balance of the loan and the interest rate, it looks at how much money you're making.
Okay.
And then adjust your payments to a percentage of that income. So where it's nice is if you're doing a residency for say 5 or 6 years, or even 4 years, you're going to be making much less money as a resident than you would as an attending. Mm-hmm. And you can knock out 4 or 5 or 6 years. And if you tag a fellowship on there, then
you're paying less.
Exactly. So what you'll end up doing is you'll have, somewhere between 3 and 5 years of paying on an attending salary, and then you'll get a majority of that $400K just wiped out.
Mm-hmm. There's a myth going, or it's not a myth, but what I hear a lot going on right now, and I really would like for you guys to address this, is it's been 10 years since PSLF. They screwed over a bunch of people. People are not getting it. Don't believe it. Don't do it. And I feel like that's the wrong information. Mm-hmm. I feel like I'll let you guys speak about it, but that you need to like let people know every year. And there's like these checks you need to do. Is it just that, or Like, yeah, can you dispel that myth or just let people know going forward how to, like, that PSLF is still a thing that you should try for?
Yeah. And so I think one of the major contributing factors to this was, I think it was an NPR report or something, where they said 99% of people who applied for PSLF don't receive it.
Yeah.
Which is frightening, because 99% is a huge percentage.
Yeah.
I
I don't
mean,
think I'm the 1%. That's good.
I mean, we do work in numbers, so I can tell you for a fact, 99 out of 100 is most of it. But basically, that was due to a number of factors. The first one is that when PSLF first started, they only had one repayment plan.
Uh-huh.
And it was called income. Oh goodness. I see income contingent repayment. Sorry.
Oh, I
Lost
see.
my
Okay.
brain there for a
They
second.
still have that.
They still do, and it is still absolutely terrible.
Okay.
It is almost useless.
Mm-hmm.
There's one specific situation where it might be useful, but in general, it's not worth it. And it takes the highest percentage of your income. So originally, people were like, hey, this repayment plan is not particularly good. So after a year or so, when they realized that, they all bailed on the program. The other thing was
they left the repayment plan, which takes you out of contention for PSLF.
right.
And that's not a very clear situation.
Okay. Okay. So that's reason number one why a lot of people, and because they only had that payment plan. So in order for someone at the very beginning of PSLF to get it, they would have just had to stay with that. Now you can move around, right? And there's more options.
Yes.
Okay. There's
So the other thing was, initially the program only covered about 25% of the available loans.
Okay.
So people had to have the right loans and then stick with a terrible repayment program.
Okay.
In 2013, I believe it was 2013, they introduced 3 other repayment plans, which are income-based repayment, pay as you earn, and then revised pay as you earn.
Repay.
Exactly.
Yeah. Repay.
Pretty much. So pay and repay are the 2 best plans.
They have some
and
benefits.
they make it a lot easier. They also expanded the amount of loans that the program would cover.
Okay.
So now you just need federal direct loans. You don't have federal direct loans, but you have other types of federal loans. You can actually get around that by consolidating them all into one federal direct so that everything will apply. But because that didn't start until about 2013, you need 10 years. So the people who have started that program, like the day they came out with those repayment plans and are going to pay every month for 10 years, they're not eligible for forgiveness until 2023. So the people who had the best shot at completing the program still have another 3-ish years before they're eligible.
Okay. So we'll see people if they've gotten the good advice, if everything well. Okay.
So we're expecting to see a large bump in the amount of people who have been qualifying for the forgiveness once that time starts coming up.
You also mentioned the employer certification form. So this is the form, the only loan servicer that can legally count your payments for PSLF is FedLoan, even though the other servicers tell you like, oh, no problem, we'll keep track of it. And then you can switch to FedLoan when you're going to apply for PSLF. Yeah, we're all shaking our heads.
No, FedLoan.
No, don't listen. Yeah, FedLoan. But that ECF form, the employment certification form, that is where your confirmation that FedLoan is counting your payments appropriately.
Annually.
at least annually. You can do it biannually, and
Okay.
we would probably even recommend doing it twice a year.
Okay, just do it.
You can submit it every month if you want, but your employer will hate you for it.
Yeah. Okay.
They have to
But
fill out
that's
half
like
of it,
knock,
too.
knock, knock, knock. I'm here. Let them know I was here. I was paying while I was here. Okay.
Yep. Yep.
That's it.
Yeah, exactly. And there's no nice, pretty reminder tool to do this.
Mhm,
You know, it's
mhm.
all on the resident.
Yeah,
and
there's just
intending
so
to
much
actually do
on
it.
in residency that I mean, and just in life. I think everyone could use someone to fold their laundry, someone to, remind them for their ECF form, someone to floss them. Like everyone could use these things. So it's just life is hard, but
Yeah.
what we're saying here is you got to get on top of it because it'll just be harder without it, or you'll limit yourself.
Right. And so when I mentioned, the repayment plan that you choose can have a large impact, even if you choose income-driven repayment, and you choose, income contingent repayment versus pay or repay, you're paying essentially twice as much
Mm-hmm.
because pay and repay take 10% of the income and income contingent takes 20.
Yeah. Okay.
So if you're not necessarily paying attention or you get bad advice, that adds up over,
That adds
you're
up.
talking
Money
about an extra 10% on whatever your salary is.
that you could be using for
Yeah.
anything else.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. So the point is to save money. Yeah, to just have I love, the strategy that keeps coming back to that. It's having a strategy.
Mm-hmm.
What resources do you guys recommend for people? And also, or before we get into resources, I want to ask, because this is the second part to the financial advisor, financial planner. I think what a lot of people think is that rich people have those, and I can't afford those, and I'll have one later on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How can you explain to someone, and I think they, if they've listened to this, they kind of understand the cost of not having one or not having a strategy. But what would you say to, like, one, does a medical student need a financial advisor? And two, what would you say to a resident who is not sure if they should budget that in?
Super good questions.
And what would be the best thing? Would it be better to have, pay for a financial advisor once and you just kind of meet with them once and then you never see them again, another year, get another one? Like, what's the best way to go about it? What's the bare minimum and what's the best thing you could do?
Yeah, I do want to preface our answers by reminding everyone that we are biased because we think the way that we do it is a good way to do it.
Yeah.
So, just want to throw that out there before I share my opinion.
I like the way you guys do things too, so I'm biased.
I mean, it's going to be like, people will know we're biased regardless. So at least if you remind people, it's like, hey,
they're honest.
So know.
Yeah.
We're going to lay the cards out on the table. That's how it works. So, but as far as we are building something that we don't know of anyone else who's doing, which is to build a financial residency, the head to toe financial residency program, which is a series of, presentations, talks, as conversational as we can, to groups of medical students while you're in medical school. So usually we're working with student government associations or outside associations. We found that works a little bit better than the red tape of universities and med schools. But anyways, that is all pro bono. That is part of our mission to spread education in a digestible, approachable. Nathan is much funnier than I am. He keeps it fresh. Jokes. So anyways, outside of that, so when you transition to residency, the way that we operate is we have a specialized financial planning service that's at a lower fee, specifically for residents. We call it early career planning.
Okay.
And it focuses on student loans, budgets, and employee benefits maximization. And we're not going too far out of that because we know residence time is very minimal.
Yeah.
And so we're just kind of keeping you on the right train, going in the right direction. And we've priced it to be affordable for a resident making $50,000 to $60,000 a year. So as far as how much can you afford, we like to stay somewhere in the 2 to 3% of your income range for a financial planner.
Okay.
You can use that as a rule of thumb. I personally don't love the one-time financial planning, especially for someone who's a resident, because the implementation, again, back to we need to help our clients take action. Yeah. And that's where our value comes from. It's very hard to be like, here's your list. And some people can, and some people can do it. Yeah. And those people, great. Hire somebody who will do an hourly one-time plan. But for the 95% of people that won't work, just, probably best to hire someone ongoing.
Yeah. And also getting back to, first thing, the financial residency is also for residency groups. Because.
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah.
That big giant hole that I forgot.
Yeah.
So the program, the pro bono program with the information and presentations you do for medical students and residents.
Yep.
But the service of my own, how do I, figuring out my own financial plan, you do for a low cost fee that falls in between the range of 2 to 3%, which can be found on your website.
Yeah.
Really transparent. I just love I've told you guys before, I just love the transparency of your site, because as someone who does have a budget, it just puts me at ease to see something like that. And then I can put it in my budget and just make it work, and I know maybe people coming to you don't have a budget, but I just feel like that is such a digestible thing to even work towards. And then you can say, oh, let me not do this, this, or that, so I can do this.
Right. Yeah. So the question of, do medical students need a financial planner? In general, I would say probably not.
Okay.
I agree.
Yeah, you're gonna most likely be in a situation where there's not a whole lot you can do for the most part. A lot of the value comes as you're about to enter residency and making some of those decisions and coming up with some of those strategies. But for, years 1 through 3.5, you will hopefully be able to make it through without needing someone like us.
Okay.
And as for the one-time thing, as Annelise said, that's not really, it can work for some people. And again, super biased, this is the way we work. We typically what we enjoy is having longer term relationships with our clients. We know that we're not going to be able to work with everyone. So we want the people that we work with to be long-term people so that we can develop a much stronger relationship and foundation of trust. So there are definitely people who will do, hey, it's $200 for an hour and I'll tell you what to do. We try and stay away from that just so that we can have a more meaningful relationship with people.
And when people work with you, how often do you guys meet? What's that like?
Good question.
Go for it, Annelise.
And would I have access to you if I had questions and yeah. That's so nice. I feel like just so supported. I don't know. That's
the goal. That's absolutely the goal. And as far as how often, so any of our clients that work with us on an ongoing basis have unlimited access to us.
Okay. The
way we structure it is we have, for our early career planning clients, we have a minimum of an annual formal, quote unquote, meeting. And that's where we're like, we've got our list of things we need to go over. Let's make sure it happens.
Yeah.
Outside of that, you have unlimited access to us. We also reach out, regularly.
Okay.
To people. And what we ask is, if you want to have a meeting, just let us know what the agenda is going to be.
Okay.
We're there as a resource.
Okay.
So that's how we structure with the early career planning track.
Awesome. Wow, guys.
Can I turn the tables
Yes. Oh,
and
yes.
ask you?
Please turn the tables.
Turning the tables. Okay,
After
I
I
was like, I
grilled you
have to
guys for an hour.
take advantage of this opportunity to
Yes.
ask a couple questions. And there's a couple things that have been on my mind, and I think you're uniquely qualified to answer them. So I am not a doctor, never been to med school, but I'd imagine there's quite a bit of guilt and maybe even shame associated with self-care and taking breaks as a medical professional in medical school, residency, and even when you're attending. Can you talk to us about that, and what have you seen in practice?
It really was something that made me quite sad to see. I think because I see the effects of not taking breaks, and I've never been someone to grind so hard. I work hard, but I've always thought that I should eat regular meals and such. But in medical school, people I think are panicked, not panicked, but really stressed out about the future because your grades, you don't know quite what matters, but it all matters. And that's part of why I built Developing Doc and the Road to Residency, was because let's have some transparency of like what you could do your first year and what you could do your second year and what your tests mean. And so you can actually see when you can take breaks. And if you can see how, let's say you have a medical issue, you can take some time. But without that bird's eye view, people in medicine work in such a way where the people ahead of you will only kind of talk about the next step. So, oh, you're studying for this test. Oh, it's really hard. You just wait till you get through it. And then you kind of get to the other thing and you feel kind of accomplished, but then there's a next test and the next thing. So you never really schedule breaks besides that celebration, which also can be pretty, what I saw, at least in my experience, not the best way to take care of yourself. You go out and have drinks with your friends. You kind of like party, or you fall asleep, right? Whatever it is. But it's more like work, do whatever you call your self-care, work, do whatever you call your self-care. And it's less of it kind of put into every single day. And it's hard because we get these wellness lectures where they talk about it, but they also start talking about suicide. And it's really sad. It's a real thing. I think we lose like up to like 2 medical school classes a year of physicians committing suicide. I think the number is like 300.
Wow.
And so there is this, I don't know, there's the fear of you not getting to where you need to be, and it's going to only be your fault, right? Because it's like, whose else fault would it be? You're the one in medical school, right? Everything is set up. You just have to pass these obstacles. So I think people see it as a marathon. And when it comes to self-care, I think people just, it's not necessarily that they don't like to talk about it or they feel like, one, it's not really, I don't know what the conversation around it. It's kind of rare to be like, oh, I took this day off. Like you really just, it just doesn't happen that often. But where the guilt and the shame comes in is in your personal, when you're resting. So I actually deal with this a lot. I'm at the end of my workday, like, now I go through my workday, and I'm sitting on the couch and I'm trying to enjoy Seinfeld, but I just feel like maybe I should study more. Maybe I should do 6 more flashcards. Maybe I should. And the relaxation doesn't really happen. And I think there's a lot of anxiety. So you have 1 or 2 people. You have the people who can't really relax or are really anxious when they're doing it, or you have the really avoidant people who don't even like relax that much. They just keep going.
Yeah, that's actually flows exactly into my next question. And this is a personal thing, because sometimes, especially with Crohn's disease, I have had to train myself to listen to my body, because I also have dyslexia. And the way I overcame that was just like nose to the grindstone, kind of similar to what I would expect in med school, where it's like, you just have to work so much to get it done. And there's like barely enough hours in the day. And And that's kind of what it's like as somebody who's going through the traditional school system that has a learning disability.
Mm-hmm.
And so in order to kind of figure out what I need to do for Crohn's, I needed to go backwards and figure out, that like super closely held belief. And what I find myself doing sometimes is I'm like, oh, I'm taking a break, but really I'm just pretending to take a break, and I'm just like convincing myself. I'm like, oh yeah, this is a break, but
This is a break.
Like, I did this the other night and I really wanted to learn how to make candles.
Yeah.
And I spent like 3 hours learning all about like, oh, do you get soy wax? Do you get paraffin? How do you eat? All of that stuff. And so it's like a pretend break.
Yeah.
And my question for you is this normal?
It's normal. It's what I do. I literally, sometimes I'm just like, it's weird. It's like doing, I think, doing is just much easier. Taking action. That's why it was so interesting when you said earlier, we're about taking action. Cause I was like, man, can I switch to can I switch over to you? Cause like, I'm supposed to be a mental health expert, and it's really a lot of what I know is taking action, but there is a space for just being and feeling. And that's a lot of what meditation's about, and about just like being able to sit. And what I'm working on right now is like allowing myself to feel my anxiety or whatever it is. Like, even when I'm supposed to be relaxing, instead of thinking about the fact that I'm not as relaxed as I wish during my relaxing hour, I just kind of let myself be that emotion. But it's hard. It's extremely normal. It's something that I think everyone goes through, especially med students and people in high pressure careers. A lot of people in medicine are prone to what they call, is like, it was described to me as an agitated depression. It's a depression that looks kind of different. It's not the depression where you're in bed, can't get up, though some people experience that. It's a depression that almost like you just keep doing because you just like you just can't really sit still. I'm not saying everyone has depression or that you have to, saying this, but it definitely is getting things done and moving things forward and checking off your checklist feels good. Rest, even though it does make you feel good in the end, I think it's just really scary, and it's harder to see how that aligns with your goals, right? It's harder to see how focusing, like with finances, I could like sitting down and looking at my debt, or looking and like just telling myself the truths of like, this is what your financial situation is. That doesn't feel good in the moment. And it's not instant gratification. Like, it kind of just, every time I deal with something health wise, every time I deal with something financial wise, I don't feel so great. But in the long run, I start to see, I'm really happy I did that.
Yeah.
Really happy I did that. I'm really happy I made that choice. So I think it's that. I think it's the way that humans are with like instant gratification. You just don't feel so great.
Yeah. I don't think this was your intention, but I really liked that you just brought up how I was so adamant about us needing our clients to take action.
Yeah.
Because I actually think you bringing it up in that context kind of pokes a hole in that. And I'm glad you did, because it's not, we do also want to focus on how people's relationship with money feels.
Yeah.
It is not just, we are not just like robotic. Make sure you do your budget.
Sign this form, do this thing. Yeah.
And like you said, it's hard because that relief comes long-term.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not always super long-term. When you have a budget, you get 3 months into it and you're like, I had no idea how freeing a budget would be.
Yeah.
So it's not super, super long, but it's not instant.
Yeah.
But it actually feels horrible.
And if you don't know what the benefit of it is, if it's like, if I have a test on Friday and I'm taking a break on Tuesday and just deciding, okay, I'm eating ramen today, I'm not going to study. The benefit is like, okay, yeah, I got to rest, but what if I fail that test? Mm-hmm. What if I miss the 5 points? Like, is it worth it? Is that rest worth it? And I ask myself that every day. I didn't do as well on my my board exam as I wanted to do. It was one of the first times that I didn't do too hot. And I didn't allow myself to feel shame for it. I still don't. It's just something I'm telling myself over and over and over, like I'm instilling that in me. But I will say there have been these moments where I'm just like, you were like, it was 1 month, you rested, you slept well every night. That was nice. But like, that test, so it's like, I think some people make a quick decision that it's just worth it to keep going. But the problem with things like medicine and finances is if you keep going and you really keep going, it's like you said, your options get less. In medicine, if you burn out, your career options change. You might even leave. Like it's nothing is good if you just leave it. So
yeah, I think I'm kind of a perfect example of that, because I think I worked myself into Crohn's disease.
Yeah.
And I always tell people that speak up about this exact thing. Like, if I could go back and change every dollar I made, every achievement I had to go back to not having a chronic disease, I would do it in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
So you have to have that perspective.
Yeah.
And it's really hard.
Yeah. I mean, it comes down to, which I think is really important. I think this comes down to like stress. I really appreciate you sharing your story about your health and your body, because it's like it is a listen to your body thing. And in mental health, it's a listen to your mind thing. I think all of these things show up for some reason. The gut is just such a common place for issues to come up. They've shown that IBD and a lot of these things are related to psychological things. And I think the one thing, the message that we both can send to clients, to people we're coaching, to people in the medical field, is to listen to your body. And that's what I do. If I'm too tired to study, my laptop's closing. That's really what I do it on. So sometimes, okay, push yourself there, try. I try sometimes, at the end of the night, I'll pull it up and like, after this, I'll try to send a follow-up email. And then I'm like, I don't want to. I keep saying I don't want to. So you listen to yourself. Listen to yourself in all categories, even if that's telling you not to do the thing that you think you need to do.
Yeah. Okay, I want to wrap up with this question. And it's kind of a practical question. So what would you say to a medical student or resident, an attending who knows that they're on that verge of burnout? Like they feel it, they think it, but they're kind of got their head in the sand and they don't want to deal with it because they feel like they can't, or that they have to keep going. What would you say to them?
I would say, let's stop thinking about the how for 1 second. Let's just not think about the how. Let's use our imaginations, because I think your imagination is such a powerful tool. I think in the world today, if we spent more time just imagining what could happen, I just feel like it invigorates you. It brings something out. So I would say, what is it that you want? Like, what do you want? What type of patients do you want to treat? What do you want your day to look like? What are your wishes? And just hear that and write them down and just like sit with that. I would just sit with that for a moment and sit in that land, maybe even have them meditate on it. I think Tony Robbins does this really like great thing where he like has people like pull back a rubber band and then like release yourself into the future and like, what do you see? And once people can come to terms with what they want, I think then and only then you can start to say, okay, now look, what if I told you did not have to do this alone, and I will be with you every step of the way? And you can say, okay, we can do it together. Because I think people just are really afraid about doing it alone. So much so that they think they'll fail. They like, I just am not guaranteed to get there. So why would I wish it? And it's like, no, you got to start by wishing it, because I don't know what dream hasn't started like from a dream. Like, what dream hasn't been achieved from a dream?
I can relate to that so deeply, because when I was kind of jumping off this health cliff unintentionally, the one thing that I did know that I need was somebody who knew a lot more about what to do than I did.
Yeah.
So I went and I got a therapist.
Yeah.
And I got really lucky because she ended up being amazing. Her name's Monica. And I remember,
Monica.
yeah, like, yes, Monica, I love you.
Manifested Monica.
I was like, I don't know what, I am screwed up and I need help. So, and one thing that I'll like never forget this appointment, because this was like, I don't know, I had like 15 appointments. Like, we knew each other pretty well at this point.
Yeah.
And she just looked at me and she's like, what do you need? And what do you want? And I just started crying. I literally couldn't answer her. She's like, okay, you know, like, let's wrap up for today. It's too far, you know, and we like gradually got there.
Yeah.
And it was hard because I just kept thinking, like, how do you not know what you want? You know, similar to a medical student, like, okay, yeah, I've gone through school, I've done graduate school, I've done all of these things. Like, this is so simple.
Yeah, it's not.
And it's not. Yeah, it's complex. So that's great advice.
Oh my gosh, I love that. Thank you guys so much. I really enjoyed spending this time with you.
You as well.
Yeah,
Thanks for having
awesome.
us. So fun.
It's really cool. Like, you know, I'm not okay. Thank you guys. I'm gonna stop the recording. Wait, let's see.